The cargo bay smelled of rust and broken dreams. Dante Cross sat chained against the cold metal wall, his muscular frame tensed with barely contained fury. 3 days ago, he'd been piloting his freight runner through the outer rim. Now he was. Merchandise, bound for some alien world he'd never heard of. The ship shuddered as it entered atmosphere. Through the small porthole, Dante caught glimpses of crystalline spires reaching toward twin suns. The planet below glowed with an ethereal beauty that made his chest tighten. Even in captivity, he couldn't deny the breathtaking sight. Welcome. To Nexera, human, rasped the trader who'd bought him from pirates. The alien's 4 arms gestured grandly at the approaching cityscape. Your new home awaits. Dante's jaw clenched. I don't have a home anymore, thanks to you. The trader's laugh was like grinding metal. Oh, but you do. The royal palace. Princess Velora specifically requested a human male. Something about studying your species' legendary stubbornness. She's about to get a masterclass. Dante muttered. The palace landing pad was a marvel of alien engineering, carved from a single piece of luminescent stone that pulsed with inner light. Dante was hauled from the ship in energy shackles, his legs steady despite the ordeal. He'd learned long ago that showing weakness only invited more pain. The receiving chamber was vast and intimidating, filled with beings of various species, all dressed in flowing robes of deep purple and silver. At the center sat a throne that seemed to be carved from starlight itself, but it was empty. Where is she? Dante asked, his voice echoing in the space. The princess does not attend every delivery, replied a tall, thin alien with golden skin. And too many eyes. I am High Counselor Thane. You will address me as your excellence. I'll address you as whatever I want, Dante shot back. Where I come from, respect is earned, not demanded. A ripple of shocked whispers ran through the assembled court. Thane's multiple eyes narrowed dangerously. You forget your place, human. You are property now. Property doesn't talk back, Dante said with a grin that held no warmth. Maybe you should have bought a pet instead. The massive doors at the far end of the chamber swung open with a sound like distant thunder. Every being in the room immediately dropped to one knee, heads bowed. Dante remained standing, his green eyes fixed on the figure that entered. She was tall and graceful, her movements fluid like liquid mercury. Her skin was the color of polished silver, and her hair fell in waves, of deepest black to her waist. But it was her eyes that captured him completely, burning crimson orbs that seemed to look straight through to his soul. Princess Velora Nightshade walked toward him with predatory grace, her gown of midnight blue flowing around her like captured starlight. She stopped just beyond arm's reach, studying him with an intensity that made his pulse quicken. So, she said, her voice like velvet wrapped around steel, this is the human beast they promised me. Dante's eyebrows rose. Beast? Lady, I haven't even started yet. The court gasped at his informal address, but Velora's lips curved in what might have been amusement. She circled him slowly, her gaze taking in every detail of his appearance. The torn flight suit that revealed glimpses of scarred muscle, the defiant set of his shoulders, the way he watched her with unguarded interest instead of the fear most beings showed in her presence. You're not what I expected, she murmured, stopping in front of him again. What did you expect? Dante asked, his voice rougher than intended. Something more broken. Most beings cower when brought before me. You look like you're deciding whether to kiss me or fight me. The honesty in her observation caught him off guard. Dante felt heat rise in his chest, spreading outward until his whole body hummed with awareness. What if I told you I'm considering both? The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Velora's eyes flashed with something dangerous and exciting. I would say you're either very brave or very stupid. I've been called both, Dante admitted. Usually in the same sentence. She laughed then, a sound like silver bells with an edge of darkness. I think I'm going to enjoy having you here, human. Dante, he said, my name is Dante Cross. I know who you are, Valora replied, stepping closer. Former military pilot turned freight runner. No family, no ties, no one to miss you. Did your homework, princess? I always research my acquisitions thoroughly. Her gaze dropped to his mouth for just a moment before returning to his eyes. I want to know what makes you different from the others. Others? Dante's voice carried a note of challenge. The human males who've been brought here before. They all broke within days, begged to be sent home, wept like children. She tilted her head, studying him. But you're still fighting. Even now. I don't break easy, Dante said quietly. And I don't beg. We'll see about that. The promise. In her voice sent heat shooting through him. High Counselor Thane cleared his throat nervously. Your Highness, perhaps we should discuss the humans. Accommodations. Valora waved a dismissive hand without taking her eyes off Dante. He'll stay in the Tower of Whispers, the suite overlooking the Crystal Gardens. But Your Highness, Thane protested, that's reserved for honored guests, not. Not what? Valora's voice carried a warning edge. Not property, Thane finished weakly. And perhaps he's not property after all, she said, her gaze never leaving Dante's face. Perhaps he's something else entirely. The energy shackles around. Dante's wrists suddenly dissolved. He rubbed his wrists, feeling the circulation return to his hands. What's the catch? No catch, Valora said. Consider it a gesture of good faith. But don't mistake freedom of movement for true freedom. You're still mine, Dante Cross. The question is what I plan to do with you. And what do you plan to do with me? He asked, taking a step closer. The space between them crackled with tension. Valora's breath caught slightly as she looked up at him. For a moment, the imperial mask slipped, and he saw something vulnerable and hungry in her crimson eyes. I plan to discover what makes a human heart beat so fiercely, she whispered. Careful, princess, Dante said, his voice dropping to a rough murmur. You might find out it beats for reasons you're not prepared to handle. The challenge hung in the air between them like a live wire. Valora's lips parted slightly, and Dante had to fight the urge to close the distance between them right there in front of the entire court. Escort our guest to his quarters, Valora commanded, her voice steady despite the fire in her eyes. See that he has everything he needs. What about restrictions? Thane asked nervously. None, Valora said firmly. He's free to explore the palace grounds. I want to see what he does with his freedom. As guards approached to guide him away, Dante looked back at the princess. This isn't over, is it? Not even close, she replied, her smile holding promises that made his blood run hot. As he was led from the chamber, Dante could feel her eyes on him until the great doors closed. He'd been brought here as a captive, but something told him the real imprisonment was just beginning. The princess wanted to study him, to understand what made him tick. What she didn't know was that he was just as fascinated by her, the way she moved like liquid silk, the fire that burned behind her royal composure, the challenge in her voice. When she spoke to him, he'd come to Nexera in chains, but he was already planning his counterattack. Princess Valora Nightshade thought she'd captured a beast. She had no idea she'd caught a man who was about to turn her perfectly ordered world upside down. The Tower of Whispers was more luxurious than any place Dante had ever lived. The walls were made of translucent crystal that shifted color with the light of Nexera's twin suns. His suite overlooked the Crystal Gardens, where exotic plants from them across the galaxy grew in impossible harmony. But luxury couldn't cage his restless spirit. Dante stood on the balcony, watching the alien cities spread out below him like a jeweled tapestry. 3 days had passed since his arrival, and he hadn't seen the princess since that first electric encounter in the throne room. Part of him wondered if she was avoiding him. Admiring the view? The voice made him turn. Princess Velora stood in the doorway, no longer wearing her formal cork robes. Instead, she wore a simple gown of deep green that hugged her curves and made her silver skin glow like moonlight. Her long black hair was unbound, flowing freely around her shoulders. "The view just got better," Dante said, his eyes never leaving. Her face. She stepped onto the balcony, moving with that predatory grace that made his pulse quicken. "I thought you might be planning an escape by now." "Where would I go?" Dante asked, leaning against the crystal railing. "I'm light years from home, don't speak the local languages, and have no ship. Besides," he added with a grin, "I'm starting to like the scenery here." Velora moved to stand beside him, close enough that he could smell her perfume. It was exotic and intoxicating, like night-blooming flowers and distant stars. "You're not what I expected, Dante Cross." "You keep saying that. What exactly did you expect?" "Fear," she said simply. "Every being in this galaxy fears me. My mother rules with an iron fist, and I'm her heir. People bow and scrape and tell me what they think I want to hear." "And what do you want to hear?" Dante asked, turning to face her fully. Velora's crimson eyes met his, and for a moment her imperial mask slipped completely. "The truth. I want someone to look at me and see more than just a crown and a title." "What do you want them to see?" "A woman," she whispered. "Just a woman who's tired of being alone." The vulnerability in her voice hit him like a physical blow. Without thinking, Dante reached out and touched her face, his fingers tracing the elegant line of her cheek. Her skin was softer than silk, and warm despite its metallic sheen. "I see a woman who's beautiful and strong and scared," he said quietly. "I see someone who's been told her whole life that duty matters more than desire." Velora's breath caught. "You don't know what you're saying." "I know exactly what I'm saying." His thumb brushed across her lower lip, and she trembled. "I see a woman who wants to be touched, to be wanted for herself instead of her position." "This is impossible," she breathed, but she didn't pull away from his touch. "Why? Because you're royalty and I'm human?" "Because I'm promised to another." The words came out as a whisper, but they hit him like a shout. Dante's hand stilled on her face. "What?" "An arranged marriage," Velora said, her voice hollow. "To Prince Corvin of the Obsidian Realm. The contracts were signed when I was a child. In 6 months, I'll be his wife." "Do you love him?" "I've never even met him." She laughed bitterly. "Love is a luxury princesses can't afford." "That's the biggest load of cosmic garbage I've ever heard," Dante said fiercely. "You're not a commodity to be traded." "That's exactly what I am." Velora tried to step back, but Dante's other hand came up to frame her face, holding her gently but firmly. "No," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "You're a woman with a right to choose her own path, your own happiness." "And what would you know about happiness?" She challenged, but her voice lacked conviction. "I know that this," he said, stroking her cheek again, "this moment right here is the closest to happiness I've felt in years." Velora's eyes widened, and Dante saw his own desire reflected in their crimson depths. The space between them seemed to shrink until he could feel her breath against his lips. "We shouldn't," she whispered. "Probably not," he agreed, his mouth hovering inches from hers. "If anyone sees us, then we'll deal with it. My mother would have you executed." "Your mother will have to catch me first." Despite everything, Velora laughed. "You're impossible." "And you're incredible," Dante murmured, finally closing the distance between them. Their lips met in a kiss that was electric and desperate and perfect. Velora melted against him, her hands fisting in his shirt as if she was afraid he might disappear. Dante deepened the kiss, tasting her sweetness and feeling her respond with a passion that matched his own. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. Velora's perfect composure was completely shattered, her lips swollen and her eyes bright with desire. "What are you doing to me?" she asked, touching her lips in wonder. "The same thing you're doing to me," Dante said, his voice husky. "Making me want things I can't have." "You can have me," she said impulsively, then immediately looked shocked at her own words. "Can I?" Dante asked, his hands moving to her waist. "Even knowing what it could cost us both." "I don't care about the cost," Velora said fiercely. "For once in my life, I want to choose for myself." Dante was about to respond when the sound of approaching footsteps made them both freeze. They sprang apart just as Captain Riven, Velora's personal guard, appeared in the doorway. "Your Highness," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "Your mother requests your presence in the throne room." "Of course she does," Velora said, her royal mask sliding back into place. "Thank you, Captain. I'll be there shortly." Riven's eyes flicked between them, and Dante saw understanding dawn in the older alien's gaze. "Perhaps it would be best if you came immediately, Your Highness." The Empress seemed urgent. "Very well." Velora smoothed her gown and turned to Dante. "Thank you for showing me the gardens from this angle, Mr. Cross. The view is quite enlightening." "Anytime." "Your Highness," Dante replied, playing along with her formal tone dot as she walked past him toward the door. Her hand brushed his arm. The brief contact sent fire through his veins, and he saw her shiver in response. "We'll continue this conversation later," she said quietly, meant for his ears alone. "Count on it," he replied. After she left, Dante remained on the balcony, his mind racing. The princess was promised to another man, but she'd kissed him like she was drowning, and he was heir. The political implications were staggering, but for the first time since his capture, he felt truly alive. Whatever game they were playing, the stakes had just gotten impossibly high. And Dante had never backed down from a challenge in his life. Wasn't about to start now. The royal banquet hall glittered with the light of 1,000 floating crystals, each one pulsing in rhythm with the exotic music that filled the air. Dante stood at the edge of the gathering, feeling distinctly out of place in the formal clothes that had been provided for him. The black suit was well tailored, but he'd rather be in his flight gear. Tonight was the official announcement of Princess Velora's engagement to Prince Corvin, and the entire court was in attendance. Dante's jaw clenched as he watched alien nobility toast the upcoming union with glasses of shimmering liquid that changed color when touched. "You look like you're planning murder," said a voice beside him. Dante turned to find Captain Riven standing there, his weathered face unreadable. "Just enjoying the party," Dante said dryly. Riven's eyes tracked across the room to where Velora stood beside her, intended. Prince Corvin was tall and handsome in an alien way, with deep blue skin marked by intricate silver tattoos that denoted his royal status. He was everything a princess should want in a husband, and Velora looked miserable. "She's doing her duty," Riven said quietly. "Her duty is destroying her," Dante replied, his hands clenching into fists. "And what would you have her do? Abandon her responsibilities for a passing fancy?" Dante's head snapped toward the captain. "Is that what you think this is? A passing fancy?" Riven studied him for a long moment. "I've served the royal family for 30 years. I've seen Princess Velora handle diplomatic crises, military threats, and court intrigue with perfect composure. But in the past week, I've watched her lose focus, miss appointments, and stare out windows like a lovesick youngling." "Your point?" "My point is that whatever's happening between you two, it's real, and it's dangerous." Riven's voice dropped to a whisper. "The Empress knows?" Dante's blood turned to ice. How much does she know? Enough to be concerned. Enough to move up the wedding date. When? Tomorrow. The word hit Dante like a physical blow. He watched Velora across the room, saw the way she held herself rigid as Prince Corvin possessively placed his hand on her lower back. Her eyes found his across the crowded room, and the desperation in them nearly brought him to his knees. I have to stop this, Dante said. You'll be executed, Raven warned. Then I'll die for something that matters. The captain was quiet for a long moment. Then he sighed. The princess dismissed her guards for the evening. She's planning to walk in the moon garden after the banquet ends. Dante looked at him sharply. Why are you telling me this? Because 30 years ago, I was a young soldier who gave up the woman I loved for duty. I've regretted it every day since. Raven's eyes were distant with old pain. Don't make the same mistake I did. Before Dante could respond, the captain melted back into the crowd. Dante spent the rest of the evening watching Velora smile and nod and play the perfect princess, while her eyes died a little more with each passing hour. When the banquet finally ended and the guests began to disperse, Dante slipped away from the main hall. The moon garden was a maze of luminescent flowers that bloomed only in Nexera's strange twilight. He found Velora sitting on a bench beside a fountain that sang with crystalline notes. She'd changed out of her formal gown into a simple white dress that made her look younger, more vulnerable. Her silver skin glowed in the moonlight, and her long black hair hung loose around her shoulders. I was hoping you'd come, she said without looking up. I couldn't stay away, Dante said, sitting beside her on the bench. Tomorrow, I'll be married to a man I don't know. Tonight is all we have. It doesn't have to be, Dante said fiercely. Run away with me. Velora laughed, but there was no humor in it. Where would we go? He's a prince with armies and star fleets. There's nowhere in this galaxy we could hide. Then we'll find another galaxy. You're serious, she said, finally looking at him. Dead serious. I've got contacts in the Outer Rim. People who can help us disappear. And my people? My responsibilities? Your people will survive without you. They managed before you were born, and they'll manage after. Dante took her hands in his. But will you survive without love? Tears gathered in Velora's eyes. I've been preparing for this marriage my entire life. Everything I am, everything I've learned, it's all been leading to this moment. And what about what you want? What about your dreams? I stopped having dreams the day I realized I was nothing more than a political pawn. Then let me give you new dreams, Dante said, lifting her hands to his lips. Dreams of freedom and choice, and waking up every morning beside someone who loves you for who you are, not what you represent. Love? Velora's voice was barely a whisper. Yes, love. I'm in love with you, Velora. Completely, desperately, impossibly in love with you. The tears spilled over then, tracking silver down her cheeks. I love you too. Stars help me. I love you so much it terrifies me. Dante pulled her against him, holding her as she cried. When her tears finally subsided, he tilted her chin up to meet his eyes. Then choose love. Choose me. Choose us. If we're caught, we won't be. I promise. You that? How can you promise something like that? Because I have something your prince doesn't have. What's that? Motivation, Dante said with a grin. I'm fighting for love. That makes me dangerous. Despite everything, Velora smiled. You really think we can make this work? I think we can do anything if we're together. She was quiet for a long moment, staring up at the alien stars. Then she stood, her decision made. My ship is in the private hangar. Bay 7. I'll meet you there in 1 hour. Where are you going? To get the royal seal, and some emergency funds. If we're doing this, we're doing it right. Dante stood and pulled her into his arms one last time. Are you sure about this? I've never been more sure of anything in my life, she said then, kissed him with all the passion and promise of their uncertain future. 1 hour later, Dante stood in the shadows of Bay 7, watching as Valora's sleek royal cruiser powered up. She appeared at the top of the boarding ramp, no longer dressed as a princess, but as a woman ready for adventure. Ready to see the universe? She asked. With you? I'm ready for anything. As their ship lifted off into the star-filled sky, leaving Nexera and its political machinations behind, Dante realized that sometimes the greatest adventures began with the smallest choices. The choice to love. The choice to fight for what mattered. The choice to believe that two hearts could find their way across the vast darkness of space. Behind them, alarms began to wail as the palace discovered their escape. But ahead of them lay infinity and the promise of a love that would span the stars. Where to first? Valora asked, her hand in his as they watched her homeworld shrink in the viewscreen. Anywhere, Dante said, bringing her hand to his lips. As long as we're together, anywhere is home. And in the endless expanse of space, two hearts beat as one, free at last to choose their own destiny among the stars. The end